one thing we teach is deciding what your freedom numbers are. And there's 3 of them specifically, but ultimately, like what does it take monthly to be able to cover all of your expenses? That's like stage 1, and you get really clear on that number. And it's so fun to go and like tackle it and track it down. And you're replacing, that with a rental property here, rental property there, to eventually you're like, hey, I'm essentially living off my passive income. If I had to, I could retire, right? Maybe not be at the stage that you want to. But for me, like that idea of having that lifestyle freedom and taking away that stress is so powerful. So
welcome everybody out to the D2D Podcast. We got a special episode for you guys today featuring the one and only Brody Fawcett from the Real Estate Investing School. Brody was with us at D2D Con this last January. He helped out with the real estate panel. He asked some fire questions. He helped facilitate a really great conversation. So Brody, we're really happy to have you. How the heck you been, man?
Good, brother. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to jam real estate and things door to door. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm joined today by a co-host, Ben Bolingbrook, one of my good friends who is an avid real estate investor himself. I'm like, you know what? Like, we can have a cool little like conversation with like kind of me, who's getting into real estate, who wants to learn more, and then kind of a more experienced guy, and then obviously one of the goats of the business. So, Brody, I want to first dive in though, head first into your story. How did you get started? What's your genesis?
Good place to start. And it's funny because I feel like this is like one of the most common questions you get asked, right? Everybody wants to know where you got started, how you got started. So it's a good thing to keep in mind for people that haven't started yet. It's like, what's going to be your story that you're going to tell again and again? But for me, it's kind of crazy because it was by accident and I didn't understand the power of real estate when I got into it. And I actually bought my first house before I even started in the door-to-door space too. And so for me, I was getting ready to go to school in college, and I was struggling finding a place to rent. And so were some of my buddies from high school that were going to the same college. It was just really competitive. There wasn't a lot of space. And so my mom had kind of dabbled in real estate as an agent. She'd sell a couple of houses a year. Just it wasn't her main gig, but she had her license. And so she actually brought up, she's like, hey, you should just buy a house. And I don't know how I was at the time, 20, 21 maybe. And I didn't understand even what that meant or how you do that. And it's so funny because I legit thought you had to have cash to go and buy the house. And now I realize like, oh, you could get a loan from a bank and this is how you leverage and this is what's in it for the bank. This is why they loan you money and all these different things. And so even then, once I found the house, so basically started asking around, does anybody know anyone that's selling a house close by a college campus? Because I knew I wanted it somewhere close where I could rent all the rooms out to my buddies. And so found a house. This older lady had recently passed away and her family said, hey, like, let's get rid of the house and split the money. And that's kind of where I came in and bought the home. And then it wasn't until I was living there for a few months when I realized how cool real estate was. I was not paying rent, living there for free. And then I had money to put in my pocket after all the expenses. So that's when everything kind of hit home for me and just kind of got addicted to this idea of passive income and seeing it really happen through real estate. So
that's a pretty sweet story. I love, you kind of just stumbled upon it by both need and kind of by accident and then fell in love with it. What's interesting is a lot of people listening to this, of course, are heavily involved in door-to-door. You have door-to-door experience, correct?
Yeah, dude. About 8 years is what I was on payroll for with one company the whole time. So loved it. So grateful for the experience, and yeah, also so grateful that I'm doing what I'm doing now.
I love that. So, you cut your teeth doing door to door. You've been in the real estate game now for a minute. Now I want to talk about the real estate investing school. What inspired you to leave the doors and go start this company?
For me, like I said, I was heavy in the door-to-door stuff and even getting into it, which the main reason I kind of transitioned into door-to-door when I was presented with the opportunity was, hey, I could go and, work really hard during the summer and it can allow me to pour gas on this passive income, and through real estate and buy more doors and whatever it may be. And so for me, I looked at it as it was a way for me. It was a vehicle, I guess you could say. It wasn't like the destination, but it was a vehicle to get me where I wanted to go really fast. And so I love that kind of concept early on of like, hey, you can come work harder today for an easier tomorrow, and you can set yourself up if you do it the right way. And so along that first summer, I realized like how cool of an opportunity it actually was and how special it was. And so then I kind of shifted to like, hey, maybe this is more than, a 1, 2 year, 3 year thing, but I want to actually go and take as much opportunity off the table as possible. And so that's kind of how I got going in on it. For me in the very beginning, it was like, I saw as I started to meet more and more people in the space that have been doing it, so many of them have been around for a long time, and they'd always say like, this is my last year. This is my last year. And then fast forward another year, this is my last year. And I realized like, they weren't coming back because they wanted to come back necessarily every single year. Not for everybody, but for a lot of them, it was because they didn't have anything outside of it, and they weren't setting themselves up and being smart with their money. And so for me early on, I always wanted to say, hey, whenever I do transition out of this or whenever I am done, I want it to be on my own terms, and I want it to be my decision. And so even if I decide to sell another year, I want to decide to do that because it's something I want to do and I can afford to do that, as opposed to a decision that's being made for me. And so, eventually the time kind of came, and which is another question a lot of people ask is like, how do you know when to transition out? Which is, it's like so many angles to that, and it's an important thing to kind of figure out. But essentially for me, it was a leap of faith, but at the same time, like I'd been setting myself up for years and years and years to where it wasn't a hard transition because, I was making enough money outside of the active knocking doors and building teams as I was doing it inside the doors, inside the grind. So when I transitioned to real estate investing school, it was one of those things where I've been doing it for so long, and then so many people started asking, and so I was already kind of teaching it, and saw the power of that and how cool it was to be able to help change people's lives that way, that I decided to kind of go all in on it.
I love that. So for a lot of door-to-door guys listening, they're pretty young, a lot of change in their pocket, essentially burning a hole in their pocket. A lot of guys are kind of bad with money. A lot of guys are interested in wanting to get started in real estate, but are kind of intimidated by the process. What's kind of their step one?
Yeah, such a good question. I think like the first thing is just to get educated, right? Which if you're listening to this podcast, like obviously you believe in that and you find, power in that. Especially, while you have a good opportunity and you are making good money, it's almost more responsibility and more pressure on your shoulders to be smart with that and to be a good steward of that. And so I think educating yourself and understanding that, hey, you don't know what you don't know. So many people think it takes money to make money when that's really not the case, right? What's more important than that is understanding, hey, there's different strategies that align with where I'm at currently. They align with my strengths, right? And then they help mitigate my weakness. And so the only way to kind of figure that out is to learn. And that doesn't mean you have to spend money. I mean, that's what real estate investing school is. We have a one-on-one coaching program. We actually like accelerate the entire process where you're assigned a coach. About half of our coaches have retired from door to door, and they're like full-time real estate investors. And so like we understand that language, we speak that language. That was me. And so we help people do that on a scale of basically speeding the whole thing up. But you don't have to go hire a coach necessarily either. There's podcasts, there's books, there's so many things out there, YouTube, Instagram accounts, to where you just need to plug into it and start learning as much as you can. That's for sure step one.
Love it. Ben, you want to take the next question?
Yeah, my question for you, Brody, is like, there's kind of two different sides of real estate. There's like the short-term game, like flipping and wholesaling, and then there's also the long-term game, like obviously investing and building up your passive income. And I from social media, I know you've kind of done both, but like, how do you balance that? And like, how do you educate people on like what steps to take first and where to go? Say I have like 50 grand, should I go flip a house or should I just buy something, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, dude. So I'm more of a buy and hold type investor. I mean, I've flipped houses, I've done wholesale deals, I've done like the one-time transaction type stuff, and I've made a lot of money doing it, and a lot of like quick money too. And so that's where it's easy to get sucked into it. But like I told someone the other day, like, so I just sold a piece of property that, and this is kind of like a fluke. It doesn't normally happen like this, but this is a piece of land. There's nothing built on it. By the time I bought it, 2 months later, I sold it and made 350 grand on this transaction of it. And the intention was to keep it and hold it and to build on it. But then I just got an awesome offer on it. But like that deal doesn't get me nearly as excited as, hey, I got this property and it's cash flowing $1,000, $2,000 a month, and it's going to be that way for the rest of its life. Like, to me, that's passive, right? Like the 350 grand, you go spend that and it's gone, it disappears, as opposed to you invest in an asset that pays you the rest of your life. And so we're really big on, like, one thing we teach is deciding what your freedom numbers are. And there's 3 of them specifically, but ultimately, like, what does it take monthly to be able to cover all of your expenses? You know, that's like stage 1, and you get really clear on that number. And it's so fun to go and like tackle it and track it down. And you're replacing, you know, that with a rental property here, a rental property there, to eventually you're like, hey, I'm essentially living off my passive income. If I had to, I could retire, right? Maybe not be at the stage that you want to. But for me, like, that idea of having that lifestyle freedom and taking away that stress is so powerful. So I love the long-term stuff. For me, yeah, every once in a while there's something that comes up and you flip it. But for the most part, if I'm doing that, it's just so I can take that capital and put it into something that's going to be more long-term, more consistent. I know it's there. I know I can count on it day in and day out. And so that's more of our focus is on the cash flow.
So if you have someone that like comes to you and doesn't have a ton of money but wants to do real estate, where would you recommend they start? Knocking doors?
Yeah, I mean, knocking doors is great, right? To build up that active income. But yeah, there's a lot of strategies that don't require a lot of money. Like the most kind of like common one is house hacking, where essentially you go owner occupy a property because you're willing to owner occupy. Like a good example was my very first house that I bought, right? So I bought that house for $155,000, put 3.5% down. And then my mom even kicked some of her commission back to me. And so I think all in all, I was in this thing less than $5,000. And so I lived in one of the bedrooms and I rented out all the other ones to my friends. But the reason the bank was able to give me a loan for 3.5% down on this property was because I was going to owner occupy it. So what a lot of people do is later on, or they'll go buy a house that they get emotionally attached to and they really want to live there. It's not a good investment property, but like it's the brand new build, it's the, you know, whatever it may be, you just got married or you just had a kid. And so like you have to live in this house and you buy it emotionally versus logically. So later, go to turn it into an investment property, it doesn't pencil as well. And so if you can just learn to switch that around and be willing to sacrifice a little bit, saying like, hey, I'm going to go willing to live here to qualify for putting less money down, then I can leverage my money a lot better. And so my wife and I even did that when we first got married. I moved out of that house and I was able to rent out my room. And then we bought a duplex, right, where we were able to live in one of the units. There's a second kitchen and we were able to rent the other unit out, and that covered our mortgage. So it wasn't the house that we were like so stoked to live in necessarily. And in fact, a lot of our friends that were making less money than us, they would go out and buy these nicer homes, live these nicer homes. And we just kind of stuck to this plan of like, hey, we can qualify for this for less down. So it's going to allow us to get a higher cash on cash return. And so house hacking, house hack hopping, that's like an easy strategy. But then there's so many, like so many, like especially if you can learn the education part of it, right, and really dive into that, then you can bring on a partner because you understand how to go and create a good deal, and you don't have to put any money into the deal necessarily. And so a lot of different strategies like that, if you can go find the deal and you can negotiate the deal with good terms, then you don't need to be the one that's putting all of the money into it. And so different things like that. There's also like the burst strategy as well, which is a big one where you're essentially borrowing money to buy the house. And once it's fixed up, you've built in this equity. and then you do a cash out refinance and pay back the money you borrowed, and there's enough that's left over that becomes a down payment. So you're into this house that you now own that didn't cost you any cash. So those are just a few like quick strategies, but there's a lot of ways to do it. Even seller financing is a cool, unique opportunity right now where you don't have to have a certain percentage down. You don't have to have a certain credit, right? Like you can essentially structure it however you want and what's ever a win-win with the seller. And so a lot of times the way I've done a lot of these is, hey, the seller doesn't need all this cash up front. But what they do want, right, is they want to know the passive income of it. It's going to come in every single month and they're going to get those payments. And so if you can come and structure that deal and you're the person that's saying like, hey, I don't have a lot of cash, I don't have a lot of capital, but I can figure out a win-win and this works out for you for this reason, this works out for me for this reason, then you can go and land these deals that don't cost you a lot of cash up front.
Nice. And what would you say has been like your progression from real estate deals? Like you said, you started out with house hacking and then, maybe did some flipping and burring. And then, I think I remember hearing you that you like moved into some multifamily units and stuff. Like what does that progression look like? And what do you see moving forward for the type of deals that you're doing?
So I think one thing that's important to understand is like cash on cash return. And just understanding like how to leverage your money the best way. So that's something that's like never changed for me early on, right? It was like, how can I get into this house with the least amount of money down? That came from house hacking. I knew I could get into it with a low down payment, but then I could figure out ways to get the cash flow really high, right? I could rent it out for a bedroom as opposed to renting out to a family. I could get more money out of that. So just constantly looking at how do I get the highest return for the least amount of money possible. And then understanding, okay, what are all those strategies that it can go and maximize this cash on cash return? And so for me, what happened was as I was doing the house hacking, the house hack hopping, it just got to a point where I'm like, okay, what other strategies are there where I can, don't have to go and live in the property for, at least a year before I can move and go do the same thing again. But what other strategies and ways can I basically get a high cash on cash return still, don't cost a lot of money down and out of pocket. And so a lot of like single family close to a college campus with multiple bedrooms was kind of like my niche early on. And then it shifted more into like small multifamily, like duplex, fourplex type stuff. And then like from there, I remember looking at things when the market started increasing a little bit. And it's like, hey, maybe there's like a new construction play here where I can actually go in and design it the way that I would want to, if it's maximizing the bedroom space or whatever it is, and do this like ground up development stuff. So dove into that a lot more, especially even recently, as well as like short-term rentals. I've just finished a tiny home resort and just starting another one. It's like a geodesic dome, like glamping resort. We'll have 20 units right outside Zion National Park. So kind of like all across the board now. Have a few like apartment complexes that I'm in the process of building. But overall, like the idea of, hey, how do I go structure these things to where I can get the highest cash on cash return possible and create that passive income? That's kind of been the overall focus, no matter what kind of niche or strategy it is.
That's awesome. Are there like certain metrics that you look to hit or exceed, like a certain number on cash or on your ROI or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important too, just to realize like there's not one number isn't going to like work for everybody, right? Because it's all about the opportunity you're faced with. Like maybe you think a 10% cash on cash return is horrible. But for somebody else, like they're not looking at anything else, and their money's just going to literally sit in the bank and do nothing or do this, right? So it just depends on the situation where people at. But for me to like really like look at it, anything below 18% like cash on cash return, I know I can go get a higher return somewhere else. So like as long as it's 18 or above, then I'll like dive deeper into the deal and start looking at it from there.
That's good stuff, man. As kind of like a real estate novice who's dipped my toes into the world, I'm like, dang, this is the room I need to be in. Like, I'm like, this is awesome. Like getting this, soaking in these terms and everything, and just absorbing this knowledge. So I want to speak to, because, one holdup I've had personally about getting into real estate is the fear of failure. What role has failure played for you, and how have you leveraged that into success?
Yeah, good question, man. I think like for me, it's funny because a lot of people hear like real estate investing and they assume that, oh, like you like risk, or you like taking chances that way. And for me, I really, really don't. Like, I feel like I'm fairly conservative. And so like, I'm always going into any deal saying like, hey, what's the worst case scenario? And I want to invest based on that worst case scenario. And I want it to pencil based on the worst case scenario, as opposed to, I think it's easy to look at like the bright side of things. And we get excited about what could come out of this deal. And like, if XYZ goes perfectly, like, yeah, it could be this, and this is what it could be. And we don't look at the other downsides. And so because of that, like a lot of people will get into trouble. And so for me, early on, like I've always been that type of person where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I don't like losing money. I don't think anybody likes losing money, but I want to make sure I'm as protected as possible when it comes to, quote unquote, like failure or things happening. Now, with that being said, like I haven't ever lost money on a real estate deal, but there's a lot of things that I've learned in the process, hands down, like so many things, especially early on. And, one of those is like, I remember when my wife and I bought our first house, we had more money because we were doing door to door, and we put like this random number down as far as the down payment goes. It was just, there was no rhyme or reason. We didn't leverage money the best of our abilities because it was like an even, I don't even know what it was, but it was like an even number that just made no sense now looking back. But little things like that, just like always learning, right? Always learning. Things always take more time. They always cost more money, especially in like the new development phase of things. And so just understanding those pieces, man, it's been such a learning curve with it. And I think that on kind of the topic of failure, it's one of those things that, how you do anything is how you do everything. And most people that are successful in one category in life, they're going to be successful in pretty much anything they put their mind to, if they're really putting their mind to it, especially in door to door. Like that's, like there's a reason that the people that were high achievers before they found door to door, and they were maybe athletes or like different areas of life, they know what hard work takes, and they know how to overcome, objections, they know how to overcome failures and still succeed despite that. It's the same reason they're so good on the doors, is the same reason that you're going to figure out real estate and be good at that as well.
I love that. I think that's awesome. You talked a little bit about this earlier, kind of what working with the real estate investing school looks like, but really like paint that picture. Like if I were to call you guys up and get signed up today, what does that look like?
Yeah, cool. So when we start with like just a strategy call, which anybody can sign up for, even if they decide or not decide to work with us, we want to just give as much value as we can and put you on the right track. But yeah, so really we're going through, we're creating a game plan. And the biggest thing starts with like understanding where you're at. For one, like what are you working with? And this is the coolest thing about real estate in general, is there's a strategy for everybody. Like you asked about not having a lot of money, like it doesn't matter. You don't have credit. Okay. It doesn't matter. You're young. Okay. It doesn't matter. Like you come up with anything. And I've probably done a deal that like has allowed me to be successful in that deal that worked to your advantage, right? Where you would have been able to go do the same thing. And most of our coaches are that way too. But then on top of all of that, it's empowering knowing that like, no matter what in my mind, my internal roadblock is, there is a way to go and succeed despite that. And so we want to start with like where you're at currently, and then also where you want to go, like what your goals are. We get really clear, and we actually ship every student. We have this like welcome packet. There's a big kind of poster that goes on the wall, and we have you fill it out. But part of that you go through with your coach, and one of those is creating those like freedom numbers of like what your goals are. We want to have a 3-year plan of like, hey, This is how much passive income I need to be making. This is what it takes for me to, quote unquote, retire. And then we just work backwards from there. And so really understanding, hey, I'm really clear on what I want to go and accomplish, and helping you kind of understand that and what that looks like. And then we ask you a bunch of questions where we get clear on where you're at now, how much time you have, how much, knowledge you have, how much capital you have, all of those things. And then from there, and this is where it gets so powerful, is we're taking you from A to Z, right? We're going to help craft the strategy, the roadmap, all of those things. And we're able to do that when we understand where you're at, where you want to go. And then we just kind of fill in the blanks. And so that's the first step. Like, we just build out that map for you. And then once you do become a student, we sort you with the best coach, which is going to have to do with what your goals are and what you want to go and accomplish. And from there, it's a mixture of education, but education in of itself, like, you can go get that a lot of places, right? It's everywhere. But it's really the implementation of the education is what you need and what you pay for. And so you're consistently meeting with the coach. We have calls with the company that are consistently happening every single week that are keeping you motivated, learning how to find deals, learning how to fund them, all those strategies, and then how to get creative and force the deal is like a lot of our big focuses. But we give you every tool you need necessary to honestly accomplish your goals. Too many people say, like, I want to get into real estate. Like, yeah, eventually I'll get into it. I'll do it at some point. And the reality is, it doesn't happen by accident. You have to put yourself in a scenario and in a situation where it's harder to not be successful than it is to be successful. And the problem with just like reading a real estate book or only listening to a podcast and just leaving it at that, you end up with these good intentions that don't actually go anywhere. The best way, and it's kind of like a rule that I've had for myself now the last few years, is because there's so much information and time gets more and more scarce. Like, I pay for implementation. I don't want to pay for information because there's just too much of it, not enough time. I want to have the one-on-one coach. I want to have the accountability or someone that's, holding me to the fire. And so essentially that's what you're getting with real estate investing school.
I love that.
That's super cool. I think something along those lines, like being in real estate, kind of like you were saying, you really can't go at it alone. I remember Pace Morby saying, like, the number one way to make more money is to get around people who are making more money, And I think you've just done a really good job of that with real estate investing school. And something that I kind of remember is, like, a few years ago, I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast. And I remember you came on and, like, asked Brandon Turner some questions and stuff. And I was like, hey, that's Brody Fawcett. Like, I remember him from that Africa trip. And then, like, fast forward a few years and I see you, like, hanging out with Brandon Turner in Hawaii and stuff. And I'm like, dang, like, he really has done a really good job of just, like, getting super close to people who are, like, doing big things. And, obviously when you do that, you're the next person to do that. So anyways, it's cool to see you doing that and something that I think we can all learn from.
Yeah, you practice what you preach. I definitely am a huge believer in proximity is power, and a huge believer in, finding mentors. And especially, I've had the opportunity this past year of interviewing over 60 of the top 1% in door to door. And all of them are very prominent believers in, you cannot do it alone. You have to get around people that know what they're doing. You have to find someone that's going to be willing to teach you. If not, you're screwed. not necessarily you're screwed, but there's just a lot of dummy tax to be learned. And especially, we talked about failure, and, failure is a great teacher, and everyone needs to fail at some point in their life. But in order to, get rid of some of the, like, rookie mistakes, things like that, tying yourself to someone that really truly knows what they're doing is just a no-brainer. So we truly appreciate what you guys are doing. Ben, you got any more bomb questions for Brody?
I think all my questions have kind of been asked. I mean, I want to know, like, what your plans are for the future. What's next on your list.
Yeah, thanks, dude, for asking. For me, I mean, I have a handful of projects right now that are at different stages and moving along, which is fun and exciting. But I was thinking about, a couple months ago, and I'm like, okay, what my real estate, like what are like my goals, what I want to do. And I just want to do it with people that I know that I can trust and I have a good time with. And so some of these new projects that I have going on, one of them I was just telling you about, this 20 unit glamping project outside Zion. It's fun because for me, it's just, I'm doing it with my friends. I own 51% of it, and then the rest is split between a couple buddies. And so it's like fun and exciting to go and continue to do real estate, continue to build passive income, but do it in a fun, exciting way. And I've always been like this kind of like lifestyle entrepreneur, right? For me, I'm big on like dreaming big and like, hey, I want to get really clear on what that future looks like, and just close my eyes and picture like where I'm living, what I'm doing, what my schedule looks like, who I'm doing it with. And so because of all of that, like for me, as I break it down, like real estate has been the way to go and do that. It's the way to it's a cool thing that you can learn and maximize, allows you to own assets, but like it's fun. Like it's fun to be able to take family to certain properties. It's fun to like, I bought a house in Maui. Now it's been probably like 2 years, and everyone said it's the most expensive market in the world. Like you can't find a cash flowing property in Maui. And I bought it with no money, and it cash flows and makes a couple $1,000 a month. And there's a couple $100,000 of equity in it, right? So little things like that, where it's like, and now I actually live in Maui pretty much full time now with my family. And so for me, it's just like all about, okay, what does my dream life look like? Where do I want to wake up? Where do I want to live? What do I want to do? And how do I now go and take real estate to help me get there? And that's kind of what's been firing me up for the longest time now. And so as far as my future, like that's just keep on doing these deals that are fun and exciting for me. And then also just, I'm more passionate now, even more so than like my personal investments, is helping as many people figure this out and learn and understand and grow as possible. So that's my my focus as of now, and just kind of growing real estate investing school and just seeing the power that it has on people's lives.
Love that, man. Dude, thank you so much for hopping on. Just before we close, we got a lot of guys getting ready to go out and sell for the summer here in the next couple months. We got a lot of guys already hitting the doors in their year-round markets. What's the biggest piece of advice you have to the door-to-door sales knockers that are out selling?
So don't look at it as a couple month thing. I think the biggest mistake you can make is you just look at it as a 1-year gig, and you go into it thinking like, hey, I'm just going to go and, maximize what I have the next couple of months. Like it's got to be bigger than that. One, either tie it to something that means a lot, right? So you're not just selling accounts to sell accounts, and you're not just making money to make money and hit pay scales to hit pay scales. Like it's got to be attached to something bigger and better than that. And then the other piece is just like, you have to look at it as, at least I think, like it's way more exciting when you're building something more long-term and it's not just like a quick fix. So if you can kind of have that longer term focus and longer term vision and be fixated on that, then I think that's going to help serve you. And then like the last thing is just you hit the target you aim for, right? So this is something like that it took me a minute to figure out, especially in my sales as I'm looking back, but like it seems like every year I set a goal for a certain number, I hit it. And I thought back on like, why did this happen a lot of times? And it was because that's what I was focused on, right? And so I often wonder, like, what if I were to just change my target completely? And this happened like the first year I made over $1 million, was nothing changed except for I said, hey, I want to go make $1 million this year, and this is what I'm now focused on. And so same exact thing with sales. Like, hey, if you're tracking on hitting a certain number, a certain goal, well, that's what you're focused on doing. And so, hey, maybe you can look at that goal and say, am I capable of something bigger? Should I be pacing to hit something bigger and change my focus? And that's what ends up changing results a lot of times.
I love that so much. So Brody, where can people find you? Where can people find the Real Estate Investing School?
asking. Realestateinvestingschool.com. You can go book a free strategy call. You can also go to those that are in door-to-door space. Listen to this. We have like a bunch of like recorded specifically stuff for door-to-door real estate people. Sam did a good job helping kind of with some of that stuff, but they can find that at knockdoors2owndoors.com. You can go check that out and download all this cool recorded content from different people in the door-to-door real estate space. And then on Instagram too, Real Estate Investing School or Brody Fawcett. Book a free strategy call in there as well.
Love it. Well, dude, thank you so much for hopping on. Guys, this has been the D2D Podcast. Brody, thanks for hopping on, man. We'll see you later.